The CNIB National Youth Council presents Let's Talk Money. Part 4, Provincial Support Programs.
Don't often get these opportunities, but I know both Caroline and I enjoy equally the opportunity to speak to groups of clients, so thank you. Just a little bit about ourselves before we get started. I'm a low vision therapist with Vision Loss Rehabilitation Ontario. I'm based in the GTA, just east of Toronto. I've been with the organization going on 23 years, so I've been doing this a long time, and have enjoyed meeting various clients, especially our youth and working age clients over the years. So Caroline, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we can get started.
Yeah, so I am also a low vision therapist with Vision Loss Rehab Ontario. I'm in Windsor, Ontario, so the southern tip of Canada. But I've been with Cnib or Vision Loss Rehab for 20 years this year. So yeah, I am also the Eapd Liaison for Cnib Ontario. I keep saying Cnib, but Vision Loss Rehab Ontario. So I help with questions regarding ADP through our staff to ADP directly. Yeah, so.
Perfect. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering, this is Danica here. Do you guys prefer that we ask questions as we go, or do you want us to hold our questions for the end?
I don't have a preference at all. Caroline?
Okay, that's fine, yeah. If something burning comes up, yeah, don't hesitate to ask.
Perfect, thanks ladies.
Okay, so I'll make an attempt here to share my desktop.
You're more of a techie than I am, Bianca.
I don't know.
Yeah, Bianca, that's great.
Yeah. Let me just start to.
Yeah. So Vision Loss Rehab Canada. So we are.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going to start the slideshow. There we go.
There we go. Okay. National organization, of course, and we do training for all low vision specialists, but also other specialties for Canada, but we are able to help advise on the financial parts for Ontario for sure. And then Bianca is going to talk about the other programs. I think that we're quite lucky to have the programs that we do in Ontario. A lot of the other provinces don't have quite the financial support that we do in Ontario. So financial assistance for visual aids and financial support in Ontario and other provinces. Things like the assistive device program, ADP, through the Ministry of Health for devices for Ontario residents. ACSD is assistance for children with severe disability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. ODSP is Ontario Disability Support Program. OSAP is the Ontario Student Assistant Program. And the Disability Tax Credit and the RDSP, I understand that you guys have already had a couple or a session on that, so that's great. That's the last two are federal programs to help with financial support for people with vision difficulties. So in Ontario, to be eligible for the assisted device program, so ADP, you have to have Ontario health card, be a resident of Ontario, and be considered to have low vision. That means vision of less than 20/70 in your better seeing eye with your glasses on. So the other eye may be 20/70 or less, or if your fields are restricted. And there's some flexibility in what that means for restricted vision, restricted fields. It's not necessarily, and this also is for low vision, not necessarily legally blind in order to qualify for assistance through ADP, so considered low vision. that does mean that you see at 20 feet what the average person sees at 70 feet. So you're considered low vision. The legal blindness category is if your vision is less than 2200, and that means that you see at 20 feet what the average person sees at 200 feet. Field restrictions, if your vision is less than 20 degrees field, then you are considered legally blind, but that's where the flexibility comes in regarding a person's peripheral or central vision for field restrictions and to be eligible for ADP. So normally ADP will cover the cost of a device for a person with visual disability. They will pay for up to 75% of the cost of the device, but up to a maximum amount. So it's not, devices that are $5,000, like you can't just, purchase something at $5,000 and the government would pay 75%. It's up to a maximum amount. And there's different categories of devices. Usually the individual is responsible for the other 25%. An individual is allowed 3 low-tech devices in 5 years. So things like handheld magnifiers, monoculars, distance viewing devices, that sort of thing is called a low-tech device. So 3 low-tech devices in 5 years. 1 high-tech reading aid, which is in a separate category, so a CCTV or a larger reading machine, or an audio book player. Another item under that category is Kurzweil, is computer software. So a high-tech reading aid, something to help you with reading, and also 1 high-tech writing aid, which is a computer with keyboard. It could be a laptop, it can be a desktop, but lately we've got permission to authorize for a tablet as a computer. And it does depend on the person's needs, what they might need over the next 5 years. You always have to consider. So ADP is the Assistive Devices Program, which pays up to 75% of the cost of the device, and ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, and ACSD, Assistance with Children with Severe Disabilities, helps pay for the other 25% of the cost of devices. So if a child has a severe disability due to low vision and the family income is low, then the family can apply for extra coverage for devices and service through ACSD, Assistance for Children with Disability. With ODSP, it's when an individual is considered legally blind, so that 2200 vision level, and with low income over the age of 18. So if you're out of high school and you're going into even college or university, you can apply for ODSP if your income potential is low. That would be the doctor, the eye doctor, and maybe your family physician who would write letters of support to apply for ACSD and ODSP. So that does come not from CNIB, but from your eye doctor or your family doctor. Typically, a client is responsible for 25% of the cost of the device for everyone through ADP. But when you're on ACSD or ODSP, then the remaining 25% is covered. So the devices in Ontario are meant for home use. Often we have people who have home-based employment or home-based businesses of their own. It actually is not the money that is used to provide devices for home are supposed to be used for personal use and home. keeping people independent in the home, being able to take care of their own affairs, be online, have access to research, that sort of thing, for independence in the home. So the client has to show that they're able to use the device, that it is a useful tool. If ADP is paying 75% of the cost of a computer, they want to know that the individual is using it and able to use it on a daily basis to better their, their daily living. With special authorization, ODSP may provide coverage for devices through employment support program. So ODSP, at one time, it was either you were on ODSP or you weren't. But for people who are working maybe part-time or have, low income, the idea now is that, if they can help with medical support or some financial support through ODSP, but you are working, they're much more open to that. And it is about the medical support that is so important, especially for devices, because that 25% of the cost of some of the devices can, still be significant. So vision loss rehab staff, low vision therapists, independent living skills instructors, and mobility instructors are all authorizers through the Ministry of Health of Ontario, so that we can authorize these types of devices. There are some low vision optometrists and ophthalmologists also that do low vision services, and they do authorize. And I do tell clients that it's your file with OHIP on how many devices you've accessed in the 5-year factors. So it's not, if I were to authorize 3 low-tech devices, but then if they went to a low vision optometrist, then they wouldn't be eligible for funding for other devices in that 5 years, because it's their file with OHIP in what they've received, or assistive device program. At the college and university, we always encourage people to apply for OSAP, because there is some funding for specialized devices for school and home. Like kids in Ontario, they get coverage through SIA claims for school, for computers, tablets, CCTVs, magnifiers, that sort of thing. But those devices don't go with the child out of grade school and high school. So for college or university, you want to apply to OSAP, and then you'll have access to specialized devices for school and home. So if a person isn't on ODSP, so if a person is from age 5 to 75 or 95, if they have coverage through ADP, the other 25% they are responsible for, but you can write it off as a medical expense on your income tax. As we know, a lot of times you have to have couple $1,000s worth of medical expenses to make it worthwhile to deduct off of your income tax. There is the disability tax credit, which is up to a $7,000 tax credit on your income tax. You do have the eye doctor, again, fill in the paperwork to apply for that disability tax credit. But once you apply, it will always apply to your income tax. You don't have to fill out the forms every year. They may ask for an update every 5 years through Revenue Canada, but most often they just automatically apply that disability tax credit. Because the government knows that you are spending more money on things like, devices, your transportation costs are higher, getting to medical appointments is, an expense. So that's why they give that $7,000 tax credit. So it's quite significant. So if you're applying for OSAP, and we highly encourage high school students to, when they're applying to university or college, to self-identify, to say, yes, I do have a visual disability, I need some accommodation. Oh, too often do we get that phone call from clients or their parents saying, you know, after Thanksgiving, things are dropping off, that they're not able to keep up with homework and that sort of thing. So we say, please do identify as having a visual disability, and then when they are accommodated, not just for devices in the classrooms, but then the teacher is aware maybe that they have to send things like PDF of any documents that they've handed out in the classroom or have displayed on a smart board, that sort of thing. So there's lots of accommodation that can happen at college and university, but they need to know in advance that, you know, that they're going to prepare for that. So when at time of applying for university or college, do, you know, self-identify and make an appointment at the accessibility department of the school and sit down, have a good conversation with one of the counselors there. So I think Caleb was saying that you did have a talk on RDSPs. They're like RRSPs, but also like RESPs, that if your parent or you contribute to the RDSP, Registered Disability Savings Program, the government will contribute a portion of what you've contributed. So they're matching your contributions, and the amount is quite significant. When I set up the RESPs, so Registered Education Saving Plan for my children, the government was topping up the amount that we were contributing. But when the government matches your contributions, that, you know, is quite significant. And it's meant to allow you to accumulate, you know, some really good funds so that if you did need to retire early, or your income, say, has been, you know, low or average, then when you do retire, there's those extra dollars then for your retirement.
Great, thanks, Caroline.
Any questions?
This is Danica. I had a question. You mentioned that these programs are for at-home use for devices. Do you know if there's any sort of support for people who need devices in the workplace?
Yeah, so often it may be the workplace responsibility to accommodate for you. And often, well, especially in government jobs, there is money allocated for that to start. But also for workplace, if you were, you know, low income and you had applied to Ontario Disability Support Program, they help kick in some funds for devices for people working in the workplace too. So all of this does require sort of medical documentation and, you know, support for these types of programs. So it does come from your eye doctor. If you have, you know, other disabilities, then they may consider that also. But the idea is to keep people working. So ODSP now is open to helping in employment situations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions about Ontario before we move on to the other provinces? No? If you think of something, please don't hesitate to ask it at the end once we've gone through the rest of Canada. So both as we mentioned before, both Caroline and I work in Ontario and have for our entire time with the organization. So, you know, we're more versed on what's happening in Ontario. So we've had to rely largely on support from our colleagues across the country to provide us with information on funding supports and programs that our colleagues are accessing, clients are accessing in other provinces. Unlike what happens in Ontario, low vision therapists across the country don't play as big a role in helping clients to access supports in terms of funding and equipment supports in other provinces. But we're going to share some information on funding supports in British Columbia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Quebec, and then touch briefly on Atlantic Canada. So we'll first start with British Columbia. So in BC, clients can access Work BC, which is assistive technology services that provides equipment and devices to help individuals thrive in the workplace. So unlike ADP, where it's for home use, the Work BC program is strictly for workplace support. So it provides support and assistive devices, equipment, and technology that's required to either gain or maintain employment. Also provides support around ergonomics, so things like specialized furniture, and for a lot of our clients, specialized lighting systems that may help with contrast enhancement for clients who might need full spectrum lighting, who have a greater sensitivity to light and glare. They also provide support around restorative support, so things like support, ID, and mobility canes for clients, as well as communication and hearing devices that would be required in the workplace. And then in terms of any kind of environmental assessment or environmental support, so access to the workplace itself and any kind of modifications that are required. In terms of funding support for people who are entering post-secondary education, there's the British Columbia Bursary for Students with Visual Impairments and Blindness. Student eligibility for this type of scholarship is based on financial need, academic performance, and demonstrated leadership in the community. So unlike many of the funding supports in Ontario that are based strictly around levels of vision, there's a component of financial need for the post-secondary bursaries in BC. Moving on to Manitoba, there's the Employability Assistance for People with Disabilities, or Eapd. This offers a wide range of employment-focused services to assist adults with disabilities in preparing for or obtaining and maintaining employment. So this particular program is really more about providing support and assessment versus providing funding or provision of accommodative devices or magnification aids. So they offer services around vocational counseling, vocational assessment, planning, training, any kind of emotional support services that are required in helping someone to prepare for employment, and then direct employment services, things like assistance with interviewing skills, development of personal resume, that sort of thing. So nothing in Manitoba in the way of funding or monetary funding, and more in relation to support for workplace preparation and maintaining employment. Saskatchewan is the one province outside of Ontario that has a funding program that actually provides low vision aids to clients. It's called SAIL, or the Saskatchewan Aids to Independent Living. Unlike in Ontario, the SAIL program has varying levels of funding. So depending on what your level of vision loss is, that will determine the level of funding support that you receive. So clients who have vision that's 20/70 or worse have coverage for things like magnifiers. It's full coverage, so there is no cost to the client, and clients are eligible for replacement after 2 years. And this could be because of change in vision or because the device is damaged and no longer working. Clients who have vision that's 20/50 or worse, of course, receive everything in the first funding category, as well as full funding for devices like a white mobility cane, a portable video magnifier, so a handheld CCTV, and then there is the option for a cost share arrangement for an iPad, where the client would cover around $150, and then SAIL would cover the remaining cost of the iPad or tablet for the client. And then the client is eligible for replacement for that iPad after 5 years. When they do access funding for a replacement, the same kind of agreement exists where they would pay another $150 as part of their cost share. For clients who have vision that's 20/200 or worse, or who are registered as being legally blind, they get the supports in the other two funding categories, as well as a cost share arrangement for an audiobook machine or a Daisy player. Again, the approximate cost is around $150, and then the SAIL program would cover the remaining portion. And like the cost share program for the iPad, the client is eligible for replacement after 5 years, and then again responsible for paying their portion of the cost share of $150. Our colleagues in Saskatchewan have indicated that many of their clients look to the Canada Study Grant for students with permanent disabilities, which is funding of up to $4,000 per year for clients and students who demonstrate that they have a financial need, of course, that have permanent disability, with supporting documentation from their eye care provider or physician, and that are enrolled in a qualifying post-secondary institution and receiving some level of provincial disability assistance. Moving on to Quebec, it's a little bit more complicated in Quebec in terms of funding. So, there needs to be an assessment to qualify for funding support through the AFE, or Funding for Students with Disabilities. And there is no standard guideline in terms of what qualifies as a severe vision impairment. There's a functional assessment that is done. When you qualify as having a severe vision impairment, you could receive financial assistance for up to 2 years of a program or study period. The great thing is with that particular time frame is that if for whatever reason you need to step away from your studies, but there is an anticipated return in less than 4 months, that funding support will continue despite your temporary leave from your studies. And so it's regarded as an allowance for expenses. There is also the Quebec allowance for special needs program, which covers the cost of technical tools and materials required at home to help someone sort of compensate for the cost of things that are related to their vision impairment or disability, and to help them pursue their studies in an educational institution. In Atlantic Canada, the funding programs are quite sparse. There really only exists funding in New Brunswick through two different programs. The first is the Disability Support Program, which provides technical supports and assistive devices that aren't covered through other programs specifically related to educational institutions or any kind of workplace funding that clients can access. I'm told by my colleagues that it's very difficult to access funding through the DSP program in New Brunswick, and oftentimes clients will not bother to go through the rigorous eligibility process to access funding, and will often rely on the Canada Study Grant, which was similar to funding support that's available across the country. There's also the TEST program, which is Training and Employment Support Services, that covers the cost of assistive technology and other devices that are needed for post-secondary study and employment. Again, unlike here in Ontario, the low vision therapists and other rehab professionals don't play a hand in sort of being the liaison or providing support for clients to access funding under the TEST program. I'm also told that it's not funding that is applied at the time of purchase. It's something that people apply for after with the hope of having a level of reimbursement. The only other piece that Caroline and I haven't touched on is support that's available to clients through the Cnib Foundation. Yearly on the website, there's typically a list of available bursaries and awards that clients are able to apply for. Sometimes there's requests for writing an essay around a particular topic. Other bursaries, it's a matter of applying and meeting some of the eligibility requirements for the bursary. So we encourage you all to visit the Cnib Foundation website from time to time to see what's listed there. And then an ongoing program through the Cnib is their Phone It Forward program, where clients or users of Cnib Foundation services can apply to be a recipient of a smartphone, typically a new or refurbished iPhone. I'm told iPhone 6 and newer. So clients can have a free phone. The phones come with various apps loaded into the phone, and then they can receive support through their local vision loss rehabilitation office and center for support on how to use the phone for particular applications, including navigation systems for orientation and mobility, as well as magnification apps and that sort of thing. So that concludes sort of where our formal presentation ends. So if anyone has any questions, we'll do our best to try and answer them.
Great, thank you. Any questions? I have a little question, so I can go first. You mentioned that the ODSP can help cover like the other 25%.
Yeah.
How from ADP, right? So how does that progress go? Does it, when you apply for the ADP program, does it automatically apply for the ODSP if you are in that program as well?
Yeah. So through ADP, like they say, it's from 5 to 95 years old. So we as authorizers right now in Ontario are doing up the paperwork for ADP. When a person is on ODSP, we just include a copy of their ODSP stub to say that they are eligible for ODSP, and then our accountants do the bookwork to, bill ADP and ODSP then directly. So that's great. So then, it's automatically paid, and there's no money from the client that's required at the time of purchase of a device. With CCTVs in Ontario, it's a lease program through the Ministry of Health. But we help set that all up. We're working a little bit just recently to kind of separate the funding part from, because we are authorizers, we're saying, yes, this person could benefit from this device. But then we're going to hopefully not have any part of the financial part, and we'll pass that on to our accountants and to if they're purchasing it through our store, then that is done in the Toronto office.
Okay, cool. And you also mentioned that they started authorizing iPads. Is that correct for ADP?
Yeah, so we got the okay just a few years ago, even before COVID, to say that iPads are a very functional tool. They're such a multifunctional tool that ADP did give us the authorization to go ahead and authorize that as a computer. You have to consider the client need and what they're going to be using this device for. So if it is a lot of, say, personal bookkeeping and that sort of thing, the memory on an iPad may not be enough. So it really depends on the individual, maybe how much vision they have, because of the size of the screen of the iPad. So lots of things to consider at the time of the computer assessment, and what then the authorizer would think was appropriate for the individual then.
Yeah, awesome. Good. Thank you.
The only other thing to add to that is in the reading aid category where CCTVs would fall under for clients that are on ADP and ODSP. In the other categories, there's no cost to the client, but clients on ODSP are required to cover a $100 maintenance fee, which sometimes can be cost prohibitive. So we put on our thinking hats and try and identify community resources, perhaps a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, that sort of thing, to help fund the remaining $100. But that's the only time there's a cost to the client.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Fatima. So what is a daily player allowed through ADP and ODSP if you are looking into other equipment? Is that on the list?
Yeah, so ADP and ODSP will pay for one high-tech reading aid, whether that be audio or visual with the CCTV. So
what if, sorry to interrupt you. So if I get a Braille display and a daily player, those both fall under reading?
A Brailler is a writing aid, is a high-tech writing aid, but it is in a separate category. So yes, you could get a Daisy player and a Brailler.
How about an iPad as well? Does that go into tech?
So that is a writing aid, so high-tech writing aid. So yes, you'd be eligible for a computer or an iPad too.
So I can get all three under those fundings through ADP and ODSP.
I'm not an authorizer of Brailler.
I know, I'm just curious if those were under ADP and ODSP covered.
Yeah.
I don't think, Fatima, you could get all three. You could certainly get two, right?
Okay.
Because you could get the Brailler, which would go under writing.
Not the Brailler, the Braille display.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. A Braille display. Let me just think about that.
I'm wondering if that would be considered an accessory with the
Yeah,
computer.
because we're not high-tech authorizers of that
I
type
know.
of equipment. Yeah, you'd have to talk to the authorizer.
I was
about
just
that.
curious how
Yeah.
that would affect ADP and ODSP if you're on it
Right. Yeah.
in ways.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's just where it gets kind of complicated and tricky.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, the authorizers tend to know sort of how to categorize and code those types of devices to best, I don't want to best, you know, help you access the funding. I was going to say exploit it, but that may not have been the right of words. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for answering my question. I'll look into more because I'm going off to college and might need those three information.
And have you applied to OSAP and have you talked to the college that you're applying to?
No, I haven't applied to OSAP yet, and I
Yeah.
don't know how.
There's some great,
if I'm not
great
mistaken,
funding.
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, OSAP is not open yet for the next school year. I believe we're still a little bit early, so you have time for that.
Okay. Okay.
But if you
Thank
connect with your college, they'll usually, you know, they'll have resources to help you with that, and then you can even access more specific funding for post-secondary students. So it's a good resource.
Okay, I'll look into that when I get closer to the year coming up. Thanks for answering my questions.
We have
This is Danica. I have a question.
Oh, sorry, Danica. It's Alice. We have a hand up.
Okay, they can go ahead.
This is my name is Manashi, and I was wondering because I don't think Alberta was mentioned in the presentation. Because I live in Alberta. I was wondering if there are like similar programs in Alberta, or is there a place where I can find information on the different rehabilitation services?
Yeah, Munashi, thank you for your question. I was fearful that might come up because none of my colleagues could provide any kind of specific information related to funding in Alberta. Having said that, I can maybe email Caleb and Danica, my colleagues' contact information, and then they could forward that to you, and they might be able to answer some questions more specifically. Although, you know, to my knowledge, there isn't anything sort of equal to ADP or the SAIL program in Alberta.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll try to send some information out for we'll try to send some information out for that province.
I feel like I've been in past presentations with people from Alberta, and there's either something called Seeds or Steps or something. There is some sort of program out there to support people. So it's just a matter of doing a bit of research, and we can connect you with that for sure.
I thought there was something, but that there's always quite a wait list. So you apply, you know, and then a year later you're up next, you know. So it is quite a wait list, but there is some funding, but not much.
Okay, thank you so much.
There's a comment here in the chat, I think someone has mentioned. It says, in Alberta, I do know there is the Military Police Fund. I'm getting technology from there, as well as the STEP program. That's from Curtis. Thank you, Curtis.
Danica, you're pretty close with STEP.
We do access the Military Police Fund also for kids with visual impairment. They're a great resource for help when other things are, you know, other programs aren't as helpful. Even things like specialized eyeglasses, that sort of thing. I think the Military Police Fund will help with that.
So I was wondering if if they're doing any sort of updates to the ADP, because I know sometimes it seems a little bit outdated to a certain extent, because I'm thinking with all the new technologies that are coming out in terms of visual assistance, and I find personally having to decide between a computer or a tablet isn't always ideal, because both of them serve different functions for me. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, we did quite a program. We went around, all of Ontario and did some public speaking and gathered some groups and, got a lot of really good information from our clients on what they would want to see happen with ADP. And yes, that was the one thing, if ADP would just give you a lump sum amount of money that you could work with, and then you access the devices that work for you, that hasn't gone through. This program has been around for a long time, and it's really difficult to get them to look at new technology and that sort of thing. Even virtual assessments now, because of COVID, we are able to do. So we can be on the computer with somebody and do a computer assessment or a low vision assessment and authorize devices that way. It has been like pulling teeth to try to get ADP to allow us to do virtual assessments in the past 10 years in remote areas, when it takes our staff, 3 or 4 hours to get to individuals, and you can only see 1 or 2 people in the day. Then we've been begging ADP to allow us to do those virtual assessments. And now with COVID, here it is. This is what we are doing. So actually COVID may be changing things. So we'll see what happens. But yes, we've been asking for change and for reconsideration of the devices that they do cover, but we're not there yet.
Thank you. It definitely sounds like there's a need. So it's just a matter of getting the government to be on board, eh?
Do we have any more questions? Doesn't sound like it. Well, we can wrap this up if there's nothing else. Thanks, Bianca and Caroline, for this presentation. That was awesome. As requested, we'll try to get some more information and we can send it out for Alberta specifically. If there's anything else, you don't hesitate to reach us at the National Youth Council email, nationalyouthcouncil@cnib.ca. Is that correct, Danica? I think that's accurate. Anything else?
I think one thing that I would like to add, definitely thanking both Bianca and Caroline for being here tonight, and even going a bit above and beyond what your comfort level was in researching in other provinces. That was greatly appreciated. And I think it was really sort of enlightening to see that, and unfortunate to see that the services and the supports available are not equal across the country. And I think it sounds like we almost need a coordinated national strategy, because whether you're visually impaired in Ontario or you're visually impaired in Alberta or Quebec, we should all be able to access the same supports. So it was very eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah, it certainly isn't equitable across the country, that's for sure.
Great. Just a little heads up that next week our session, or not next week, in 2 weeks from now, I believe that's the 24th.
Actually, it's April 22nd.
22nd. Thank you, Danica. That's why you're here. Is going to be first-time home buyers. So how to save up if you want to buy yourself a house, and the different programs that are available through government, through banks, anything like that. So that's going to be on April 22nd.
To learn more about the CNIB National Youth Council, visit cnib.ca/NYC.